So it was actually, so the producer, Cormac Hargadon from Loose Horse, approached me and said, I'm thinking of pitching a feature documentary to Mary Robinson. And I really like the idea. You really can't stress how large Mary Robinson looms in Irish society still. The fact that she was the first woman president, but also that she was such a popular president. In general, her approval rating throughout the 1990s were in the 90s, which is just so unheard of for a political figure. And the fact that the big crisis of the presidency, the big crisis as far as Ireland was concerned, was the fact that she left early. How often is that the case with a political figure, that actually
Right.
people are left wanting more? And she was so influential in so many really significant issues in Ireland, as both as a lawyer and as a senator. She'd had this huge role in pushing for kind of human rights and women's contraception, legalization of homosexuality. She was just so present in the political landscape, even all those years later. So it was very appealing to me to pitch to her and to possibly make a doc with her.
Good day, filmmaker Aoife Kelleher of Miss Robinson. How are you today, Aoife?
Very well, thank you. Delighted to be here.
I'm delighted you're here as well. The film Miss Robinson, I think the best words for it is a tour de force. It feels like you are meeting Miss Robinson both on the screen, but also through the film. Just like the expanse of the film is tremendous. It covers so many different areas of her life in a specific Irish way. I first want to ask you, your biography says that you seek in your work to tell hidden truths about Ireland and Irishness. This film couldn't be more Irish if it tried, and that's appropriate considering the topic. So how do you define, if you can, an Irish film? Is it just a film definitionally made by an Irish filmmaker? Is there something specific about an Irish film when somebody sits down and says, oh yes, this is Ireland?
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be made by an Irish filmmaker. I think it's just about, there are certain running themes in Irish society, that whether it's the post-colonial experience or kind of this close, almost symbiotic relationship between church and state that we've
Right.
struggled for so long, the particular treatment of women and children. And then this kind of grappling, we're a relatively new state. So grappling with identity and self-definition and how we treat people and who gets to define themselves as Irish. So I think that in my work, I've examined everything from kind of life and death and our
Right.
attitudes to that, to kind of politics and religion. When it's not to say that I'm not interested in addressing other themes or working elsewhere, but inevitably the stories arise in the society in which you live and you want to explore those and tackle them. And I do feel that you're in a particular position within a society to mirror that
Right.
society back to people.
And the way that you do it, it comes from an obvious understanding of Irish culture. Where did that come from? I can't imagine at 5 years old, you're like, I want to tackle understanding the socioeconomic principles of Ireland. How did that evolve? Like to be able to utilize filmmaking to go after these weighty issues?
My parents were primary school principals and my dad was a
Ooh,
politician. So it was like there were a lot of debates around these kind of themes at the dinner table, actually, probably from his
interesting.
5 and younger. So I think this was something that we were grappling with a lot at home. My mother taught in a very kind of disadvantaged area, and so dealing with absorbing minorities and migration and teaching the travelling community at a time when Ireland was so homogenous, and these
Right.
issues were particularly in relation to kind of immigration were really something very new in our society. So we spoke a lot about that. So actually, I probably would have been talking about these things in a very basic way from when I was 5.
It's funny, I'm like, "It can't be true that at 5 years old you were doing this," and you're like, "Actually, it can be true, I was." That's astonishing. So your parents, they were not surprised that you went into this kind of filmmaking and this kind of storytelling?
I think they were quite surprised, actually. In fact,
Nope.
I surprised myself by working in film. I planned the whole way through school to do law, and then just at the very last minute, I swerved I'd had this experience, this work experience in a legal firm that had put me off the idea of pursuing law. Just that it seemed quite clerical. And so the idea of doing something a little bit different really appealed at the last minute. It was definitely an unexpected move. And I think my parents aren't quite over it just yet.
Oh, man. But I'm sure they were thrilled for your first feature documentary, 1,000,000 Dubliners, came out in 2014, a film exploring the life and death stories surrounding Ireland's largest and most famous resting place. Looking back, what do you take from that experience to your documentary filmmaking now? Was there, I'm sure you learned a lot making Miss Robinson that you took away from 1,000,000 Dubliners.
For a lot of that experience, it really was such a joy to get access to this place that was so full of history and politics and such an extraordinary way into examining kind of Irish attitudes of life and death. It's also, Glasnevin is so beautiful. I still live very close to it now and go there all the time. So it was really such a privilege. And then to get to know the people who worked there and the people who visited there and these extraordinary characters like Veronique Crombie, and who had this very close relationship posthumously with Michael Collins, for example, and the way, like, learning about the ways in which people engage with death and with the dead. That was something that I found really enjoyable, really appealing. I just loved every moment. And then towards the end of the process, we had this unimaginable and completely unexpected tragedy that befell. And so a lot of the final weeks of the edit, a lot of the final weeks in post production were really, it was just about responding to that and trying to deal with it in a way that felt ethical and sensitive and kind. Unless we want to get into spoilers, I can't really talk about exactly what happened. But yeah, I felt quite unequipped in certain ways to deal with that. And it was one of our central contributors passed away very unexpectedly, and speaking to their family, trying to figure out if it was still appropriate to have him play such a central role in the film. So it was a very steep learning curve, that film. So much of it was very wonderful. And then suddenly so much of it became very challenging. And yeah, and it's one of those situations where you never quite know if you did the right thing, but the contributors' family were happy with the outcome. And we screened the film to them and included them as much as was as much as we possibly
Possible.
could.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you had that experience and then you got the opportunity to make Miss Robinson, how did that evolve? Were you the one who contacted Mary, or was her team reached out to you because they felt that you could tell her story appropriately? How did the film come about?
So it was actually, so the producer Cormac Hargadon from Loose Horse approached me and said, I'm thinking of pitching a feature documentary to Mary Robinson. And I really like the idea. You really can't stress how large Mary Robinson looms in Irish society still. The fact that she was the first woman president, but also that she was such a popular president. In general, her approval ratings were in the 1990s, which is her approval rating throughout the 1990s were in the 90s, which is just so unheard of for a political figure. And the fact that the big crisis of the presidency, the big crisis as far as Ireland was concerned, was the fact that she left early. How often is that the case with a political figure, that actually
Right.
people are left wanting more? And she was so influential in so many really significant issues in Ireland, as both as a lawyer and as a senator. She'd had this huge role in kind of in pushing for kind of human rights and women's contraception, legalization of homosexuality. She was just so present in the political landscape, even all those years later. So it was very appealing to me to pitch to her and to possibly make a doc with her. As it turned out, we were pitching against several other companies,
Oh,
which
wow.
we found out later. And what she liked about our idea was that we were so determined to cover everything, to cover the ups and the downs, and to reflect on the mistakes she'd made, and to really tell the unvarnished truth about her
That's
life
awesome.
and career. Yeah.
Don't you feel like that's a challenge in modern day documentaries, that you get these celebrity hagiographies that are meant just to make the person look great? And you're like, wait a second, am I watching an infomercial or am I watching a documentary? And you never get that sense in Miss Robinson.
Yeah, it would be, I would find it would be excruciating actually to make a film like that in so many ways. And like the idea of asking questions while skirting around the issues, it would just
Right.
feel If you're gonna spend all these years as you do working on these projects, you want to feel that you've really, you know, told the truth, told an authentic
Right.
story, that you've really, that you're not making something hagiographical and puff piece. From the earliest points in the pitching process, we made it clear that we would not be doing that, and she that was what she wanted to.
That's fantastic. And then also, you wouldn't wanna be known in Ireland as a person who, like, does, like, a scandalous movie on Miss Robinson and be like, you would never be in a to go to an Irish bar again.
I don't know. You know how Irish people love to tear down celebrities
Right.
and icons? I think actually that might have been a little bit more popular than you thought, but and I think we did our best to cover the thorniest issues, and she certainly, I think, did her best to answer them, but
Yeah.
there are only so many kind of
Right,
controversies over the course of her life, realistically,
right.
so it was never gonna be sex and drugs and rock and roll.
So one of the things that making Irish film, you have to have Irish music, and maybe it's a documentary in me, but when I heard U2, I was like, "Wow, okay, there's some sort of licensing agreement that went on for that." Was it easy to get all the music that you had as part of this film? Can you talk to me about your decisions with great music as part of it?
So actually, we were really fortunate. So initially, there's a section on Vietnam, and for example, and we were really hoping
Yeah.
to get Creedence Clearwater Revival for that.
Oh,
It turns out we could not
fortunate
afford
son.
Creedence. Yeah, we could not afford Creedence at all, and we were having. So we were we were really fortunate with the Breeders, and that was, I think, that was the first track that we secured, and they were interested in the project and open to be included, and cognizant, I think, of the fact that we didn't have a huge budget. But
Right.
Creedence were pretty adamant that they were not going to be negotiating. So we were fortunate, I think, at that point that Mary Robinson had a pre-existing relationship with Bono.
That's
So
awesome.
U2 very kindly gave us some cut price tracks, which got us out of a bind. Because so we used "Bullet the Blue Sky," as you may have noticed in the section on
It's
V.
gorgeous. I think it honestly, I think it works better than Creedence because you hear so many Vietnam helicopters, Creedence. I think this works, better, just it re-emphasizes the Irishness of it all.
Yeah, I do think it worked well, and you're right. It would have been too on the nose to use Credence. I don't know what we would have been thinking.
The other part of it that I thought was interesting was you talk about her climate activism in the sort of beginning of the film. Do you feel like that how would that have been heard, like, when she served in the '90s? Do you feel like that aspect of things has become more resonant as part of the documentary now than it would have if you made the documentary, say, 30 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. She's very open about the fact that it was very late on in her life and career that she became interested and energized by the cause of climate justice. So there was really no discussion of it all during her presidency, the presidential campaign, her political life. It was really about kind of social issues, about legal issues, about these kind of civil rights issues. That was what she was exercised by then. And she came to climate justice around the time that her first grandchild was born. And she'd been having conversations as in her work with the UN with communities in Africa who were talking about the fact that things were getting worse and worse. She describes women coming to her and saying, "Yes, but things are so much worse now." And I think it was a combination of the birth of Rory and also of her sense that actually climate justice was a human rights issue that really raised her consciousness about it. And it is really the abiding issue for her now. She'll talk on, for example, on what's happening in geopolitics, but it is really, really reluctantly, actually. She really wants to foreground the issue of climate justice now. And I think this is for her the single most important issue of our times.
That's truly remarkable because you see a lot of politicians of her age not caring about climate, and I think it's simply because they figure, "I won't be around for it. Not my problem," but she saw her grandchild and thought, "What about his future?" And thought about what that looks like, and I think that just wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it's impressive to see someone when we were following with her, she was frequently going to events, to conferences, to speak on climate justice just on her own, a woman, without this huge entourage who is determined to, as she says, die on the job, which is a real commitment. She doesn't This is not something she needs to be doing, this is something she wants to be
Right.
doing.
That's amazing, and the film does a great job of capturing her energy throughout it. So, it's been on a festival run since last year. How has documentary evolved? So your first feature doc came out in 2014. How has it evolved documentaries in release in terms of festivals and potential screening in those subsequent years?
Yeah, obviously the landscape has changed completely. So we've reached the streaming era now, and so you still got festival runs, and the festival circuit is still so important. But a lot of it is about securing a streamer, and we've been assisted with Mrs. Robinson's Doc Society. Were really helpful, and we've been able to stream on their platform. And yeah, and we're hoping to secure a streamer then in the course of the year. But yeah, festivals are still really important though. And for all of my documentaries up until Mrs. Robinson, we would have had a broadcaster attached. So this was the first time that wasn't the case.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah, and we were assisted in funding the documentary by a number of American executive producers who came on board when we were having real trouble securing funding for the film in Ireland, which I found, apart from Screen Ireland, who were really supportive of the film from the various early stages. I think it's like documentary is always tricky. What is reassuring now is that I think there's more interest and greater audiences for documentary now than there's ever been, which is really fantastic.
That's great. So, what are you working on now? I assume that maybe the conversation about streamings will resolve itself for Miss Robinson sometime this year. I think I read that you have another feature lined up for perhaps release at festivals this year as well.
Yeah, so I just at the Dublin International Film Festival this year, I premiered a new film called Testimony, which is about Ireland's institutions, the really kind of repressive institutions like mother and baby homes and Magdalen laundries that we're all so familiar with now. Such appalling treatment of women and children that took place within those institutions, and the Justice for Magdalene's campaign, which was really about advocating for those survivors and ensuring that they got justice in the form of basically that their stories would be recognised and also that they would receive appropriate redress, which is unfortunately an ongoing issue.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you now have 2 feature films out on the festival circuit. Aoife, that's incredible.
It's wonderful. It's extraordinary timing. It feels like there was a very long gap where I wasn't doing anything, but actually, it was actually a very busy period. You know how these things get, you'd like things to be spaced out in a reasonable, manageable way. It took us longer from initial pitching to production. Mrs. Robinson took. It was really several years. So it
Wow.
was it was 5 years, and for Testimony, it was longer again. So I met with Justice for Magdalene's the first time while I was making 1 Million Dubliners. So that was we would have met in 2013. So that was almost 12 years. The process of securing funding for these projects can be slow, and then suddenly everything just comes together at once.
That's fantastic. Definitely both should be seen. I'll link them in the show notes to the websites. So hopefully people can follow along on the Instagram and websites for festival dates and screening dates. So this is an indie film podcast. Love supporting other people's projects. Obviously, you've done that throughout your work, supporting other documentary filmmakers, whether it's at a festival in Ireland or some other method in which you've seen films. Is there an indie film or filmmaker that you wish more people knew about?
Irish documentary in general is of such an extraordinarily high standard. I think that the work of Ed O'Shea, Blue Road, the Edna O'Brien story, which is out now, it's just an extraordinary piece of work. Filmmakers like Cara Holmes, for example, and a really beautiful film that I saw this year was A Want in Her, which is a documentary by Myrid Carton, which is also on its festival run now. And yeah, I think it's a tough time for documentary in certain respects,
Absolutely.
insofar as there are so many films out there fighting to get seen on the festival circuit, but also the work being produced here is of a really high standard. So I'd encourage people to watch Irish documentaries.
Love that. Or anything in Irish culture. I couldn't be a bigger fan. Aoife Kelleher, the film is Miss Robinson, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. This has been fantastic. encourage people to see it and follow your career. You're making great Irish art, and for that, the world should be appreciative.
Thank you so much, Ben. Lovely to speak to you.